Today on the Pitchbook Podcast, Zach is pitching The Almanack of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jorgensen, and I am pitching A Life in 35 Boxes by Dave Haslam. Batter up! Zach, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Thanks, Matt. It's been a while. I'm doing good. Doing really good.
Good. You said you have a story, and I'm excited to hear it. And then I've got a question for you before we get started. So tell me your story.
Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to share from time to time when you're recording a podcast, you think, is anyone out there listening? I mean, we have listeners and things are growing, and that's awesome. But I had the coolest phone call from a friend of mine from high school, just out of the blue. He got my message. He linked to me on Facebook, said, "Hey, man, love the podcast. Give me a call sometime. Let's catch up. Here's my number." So I immediately called him, and we were really good friends. And so I call him like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" And it's just funny how your life when you're in high school, you think these are the people I'm going to talk to every day for the rest of my life. And then your life gets started, and it's like, you all scatter. You're having kids, you've got careers, you're going to school, you're moving around. And life gets busy, and while you have good intentions to stay in touch, you don't. But then when you reconnect, it's like, oh man, this is just like old times. So we had good story time, and we shared a lot of books. He's an avid reader and loves the different books that people are pitching on the podcast. I had no idea that he was out there listening, and I thought that's so cool.
So sounds like we need to have him on.
I know. I said that. And he's like, "Oh, I don't know if I want," because I'll always say that if people are like, "Oh, I really enjoy the books that you guys are reviewing, blah blah blah." I'm like, "Oh, you should come on." So I just assume they want to come on, but they're like, "I don't want to come on." But it's so fun, and we had you and I spoke with somebody who came on and pitched a book, and he was mortified to come on, if that's the right word, terrified.
Yes.
And this is a person who's so outgoing, just easy to talk to, great conversationalist.
Right.
Did a great job on the pod, and afterwards he's like, "Oh, I was so scared to come on," and he absolutely crushed it. So if you're listening to the podcast, we'd love to have you come on and pitch a book.
And it is not nearly as professional as it looks, believe it or not. So you should come on.
Matt promises to be nice. I don't, but Matt does.
Well, and that's
all right. That's my
you're
story.
Always
though,
nice,
so
and I'm not. So that actually makes sense.
I'll keep following up with him because he would be really interesting to have on. He's got kind of a cool life story.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
As I get ready to pitch this book, it is called A Life in 35 Boxes. First of all, do you have any idea any concept of what this book is about?
Well, I'm reading a book called The Art of Thinking Clearly, and it lays out like 100 different mental biases. So I'm thinking maybe like your brain compartmentalized into different I have no idea.
Yeah, he means literal boxes this time. So let me read you this. What do they call this? The second title? The subtitle? I don't know what they call this. So it's called A Life in 35 Boxes: How I Survived Selling My Record Collection.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So here's the question. Besides books, what, if anything, do you collect?
Shot glasses.
Okay.
I collect shot glasses.
From wherever you go, or like when you're on vacation?
Yeah, it's just a cheap airport, grab one. I've been to this city, been to this town, and then I've got a case. When I was younger, I collected baseball cards. I still have all of those. I've got a ton of baseball cards. I'd probably need to go through and see if they're worth, I don't even know if they're worth anything. Probably not. When I was younger, though, I thought this is easily $1 million.
Easy money.
And they've just gotten debased over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
I purge. If I see something after a month not getting used, I'll just quietly throw it away. I do not like to hoard stuff at all.
Does anybody in the house, or you don't have to name names, anybody collect stuff?
My wife collects shoes.
Okay. Just like most wives, right?
Yeah, she's a pro. She's best of the best.
So believe it or not, I also collect shoes, and I think I have more than Cammie does. So,
I do believe that about you.
Yes. I have a ton of Janowskis. If anybody knows what those are, they're cool. All right. So Dave Haslam is a famous DJ from Manchester. Um, you probably, I mean, if you're in the US, you probably don't know him, but if you're, at all at the music scene of the 80s, 90s, you know him as a famous DJ. He DJ'd at the Hacienda, which is an extremely famous club in Manchester, where a lot of the kind of the new music came from. So here's a guy who basically started collecting records as a child and collected records literally for his job. I mean, obviously for fun and to listen to new music, but because he was a DJ, he ultimately collected all these records to actually play back when they actually used to play records as a DJ. So this book is actually really short. It's pretty small. Oh, there's my camera. It's really,
Right on.
really, really easy read.
Okay.
It's cool. He actually signed it for Cammy.
Oh,
It was
cool.
very cool. He's a very cool guy. We met him in Northwich when he was doing something with the Charlatans, and very, very cool guy. He actually has a really cool book that I've started to read, but I haven't finished it. And Cammy actually did read it. Maybe she should pitch it. It's called Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth Slept on My Floor, and it's just kind of all the crazy stuff that he encountered in the music business. But this book is all about kind of why we collect things and how it feels to get rid of some of that stuff. And the gist is he just talks a little bit about why he started collecting. Obviously, he liked music and was into music, but then and sometimes collecting starts out as he talks about as a reason for something. So back to shoes, he talks about how people, they need a pair of shoes obviously to go around, but then they suddenly start liking these particular pair or want to get more, and suddenly you have way more shoes than you could possibly really wear over a lifetime.
Sure.
Same thing with music. Especially well, back then it's a little different because in order to listen to some music that you wanted to and not rely on the radio, you'd actually have to purchase the music. You and I know that very well from back in the day, having to buy CDs and stuff. But he's got some cool, kind of some interesting thoughts on why we collect things, and particularly music. So let me just read this really quickly. He says, neurologist Oliver Sacks once wrote that music evokes remembered world events, people, places we have known. Unbidden, a tune might bring back the memory of a youth club disco, a particular night out, a record that comforted us during a period in which we were floundering, a person who we wish was still in our life, a face, a place, an emotion. So you ever feel that when you listen to a song you haven't heard in a while, you're like, oh man, this brings me back to whatever the case may be. And
Oh, yeah.
he even talks about sometimes just looking at the record or holding the record sleeve. He's like, oh, this totally brings me back to when I bought this album. And there's definitely a lot of albums where I can tell you there's like, oh, I remember every detail of when I purchased this album, right? For example, I was in a random shop in Salt Lake, a music store in the mall, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I saw a Charlatans album that I didn't know was out because this was pre-internet, and I'm like, what? There's this new Charlatans CD, and this is back in the day when I didn't really have a credit card or card, so I had to get cash. So I actually had to borrow money from her to buy it, and then I had to pay her back. So like I totally remember buying that album. So anyway, it just kind of brings you back, and he talks a little bit about that, and he talks kind of philosophically about the things that we own, right? And why do we buy certain things that kind of give us a feeling that we can't otherwise have? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I mean, obviously he writes it better than I am saying it right now. But he talks a little about. I'm kind of weird in that. This sounds weird, but when you go to like a funeral, you kind of reflect on your own life, and you're like, what have I done in my life that's of value or that people would talk about or whatever? And he kind of has this moment when his dad was feeling ill, so he talks about the story, and this reminded me of what about all the stuff that you have when you pass away, right? So he talks about him being ill, right? And he says, since that moment, he started to consider what he might leave behind. He's kept stuff without ever thinking of himself as a collector. What he's amassed reflects his interests and various phases in his life, including railway magazines, ordnance survey maps, and guides to cathedrals, mostly neatly stored in folders and boxes. You don't have to consider yourself to have much of a collecting impulse to hang on to things. Inevitably, some of our accumulated stuff will be parceled into boxes at our passing. Also some will go into a skip, which means the trash bin.
Yep.
The number of boxes of stuff we may leave behind may amount to 50 or maybe 35 or maybe only one. Pictures your kids drew when they were little, love letters your grandparents exchanged between the wars, some postcards, your favorite mug, or an out-of-date passport. What happens when we go? The items we leave behind may have some monetary value, but when what's in the boxes loses its owner, maybe it loses its meaning too. It's only our own life and personality that explains the logic behind what we've collected. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Just kind of makes you think, like, my kids are gonna have to deal with all the junk that I've amassed over time, and what are they gonna do with my? I actually don't have a huge record collection, but they're not gonna, what are they gonna do with it, right? So it's kind of
there's no emotional connection for them.
yeah. So he ultimately decides to get rid of his, as the title says, get rid of his record collection, and it's at 35 boxes. And he talks about how he never bought albums or records for monetary value. He didn't buy it as an investment or, like baseball cards, like you were thinking, hey, they're going to be worth some money. He bought them as kind of truly a tool. And then he talks about how he was kind of going through a rough patch in his life. And I think it was after he was 50. And he says, I think I'm going to let this go. And it's interesting because this sounds weird. So Dave, forgive me if you're listening to this, but in a way, it's kind of, I don't know if it's I'm not trying to, discount what he's doing, but because he talks about this, 99% of the music he has, it's stored. He now has access to at his fingertips, right? With the internet and downloaded song, or, with streaming songs. So in a way, it's kind of like, well, yeah, I'm getting rid of all this physical stuff here, but I still have access to it to listen to, you know what I mean? So I guess I give him credit for getting rid of that physical stuff. And he talks about having a sense of relief. Talks about it being exhilarating. But anyway, and he spent the extra cash living in Paris for a little while. And it's kind of cool. Has two people that were kind of serious about buying it. One of them wanted to do like almost like an exhibit, I think in Italy. And the other guy is actually a DJ, so he was going to actually use the stuff. So that's who he ended up selling it to and becoming friends with. Anyway, I just think it's kind of interesting. I actually am surprised at how much, if it's how I survived selling my record collection. He literally only spends probably the last couple of pages of a very short book talking about what it meant to him to get rid of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like he spends the whole time talking about amassing the collection and the philosophy of collecting in general. And then it's really only like a few pages of like, oh, well, here's what happened afterwards. So that's the only critique I have, which is a pretty mild critique. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting. This is definitely not a book for everybody. Unless you're go ahead. What questions do you have?
Let me, here's some thoughts going through my head, because I know how much you love music.
Yeah.
And I can imagine you reading this book and you're thinking about the Deja Vega and the Charlatans and all the concerts and memorabilia, all those things that you have some emotional attachment to.
Yep.
But your kids, when you go, they're like, what is this junk? Throw it in the garbage. And that would crush you if you knew that.
Well, and I do know it in advance, right? I already kind of know that. So that's
here's my question. When you're younger, and I'm thinking of, I'll just throw out a personal story. I remember going with my grandma on Saturdays to get her hair done. So I would go stay overnight at my grandma's house, and we'd get up Saturday morning and she'd drive me to the hair person's house. I would sit there. We'd drive in her 1989 New Yorker. And she had this tape
luxurious.
Yeah. Oh, it had velvet upholstery, the new car smell. When she passed away, I think that car only had like 40,000 miles on it.
Yeah, I believe it.
It did the run to Costco
and then the hair,
and that was about it.
Okay, sorry. So go ahead.
Okay, but she had this tape of George Strait.
Mm-hmm.
And she would play the same tape every week we went. And so I memorized George Strait. Now I would at that time in my life, I wasn't in the rodeo scene. I wasn't riding horses. I just ride with my grandma to get her hair done. But I can remember so distinctly where I was, the interior of the car, the
Mhm.
music. To this day, I can recite all of those songs, The
Mhm.
Chair, Amarillo by Morning, all of these songs that are
Mhm.
on that album. And it's really weird. Like almost photographic memory of some
Mhm.
of those experiences growing up. Like when you said, when you think of a song from your teenage period, you can almost remember, at least you think you remember,
Right.
where you were, what you were doing, who you were with.
Mhm.
But as I've gotten older, not as much. I'll hear a song, doesn't really, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, like the
Yeah.
impressions that those things have on your life when you're younger. And I'm wondering, is it because those things are scarce when you're younger and you kind of attach really tightly and they become core memories? And as you get older, like today, Amazon Music is abundant. I can listen to
Mhm.
any song, don't have to worry about keeping it or memorizing the lyrics. I can tap lyrics on my phone. There they are.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you still do attach to
So
music. I don't as much.
I agree with you to a large degree. However, I think it really depends on how passionate you are about a particular, band or album or whatever. Because
Okay.
there's a time, for example, I love the Boxer Rebellion, and they had a new album out. And this was right before, at least for me, before like I was still buying songs on like Apple Music before I got like Spotify, where you just play anything you want without ads and stuff like that. And so I was like debating. I'm like, I guess I should probably buy this, but I'm like, I don't know if it's I don't know about the new album. But should I buy it? What should I do? Anyway, this is a dumb decision, but it was $10, right? So I'm like, okay, whatever. But it was actually the exact time that we were buying this house that we live in now, and I I listened to it and I just fell in love with it. But it was also we were because of the timing, we had to have a hotel for like a week before in between having a house, right, and not having a house, selling our other house and
Yeah.
moving into here. So like I distinctly remember listening to that album in its entirety multiple times in this weird hotel room, right? So I think it really depends on the situation you're in, and you're right. There's a lot of disposability with music, and because you just might randomly hear a song on TikTok or whatever, or you just hit the play button, that probably does a little bit to minimize the memory of it. Whereas I think if you actually go like specifically, like back in our day, we'd have to, we sound like old men, go and actually buy the CD, right? Or go buy
Yeah. It was a
the
sacrifice.
tape. And so you specifically like, oh man. And I remember sometimes there's like albums where like, oh, I really like this one song, and I'm gonna have to pretend to try to like the other ones because I spent my hard-earned money on this album,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I would say that there might be a couple reasons. Yeah, we're busier, we're older, but we may not be there may not be the physical sensation of getting it or whatever. Um, but yeah, I think you're right to a large degree, but there are definitely certain albums that I have a memory of. But honestly, sometimes it's because of a recommendation. So I get a lot of recommendations from friends on Twitter, and so I'll be like, oh, this is they recommend, for example, this guy that plays bass for a band I know recommended this rapper called Ren, and I'm not really into rap, but that's what I remember is more this interaction between this gentleman and myself.
Yeah.
Him saying like, oh, you got to check it out, Matt. It's totally brilliant. And I'm like, okay, I actually do like this guy, and it's not something I normally would like or listen to. But that's kind of what I remember. Does that make sense? Like kind of interactions
Yeah.
for recommendations, and maybe it's just a passion thing. Like
That's
I
true.
I don't know.
And anytime I hear a Rage Against the Machine song, I always tag you. I always like,
Yeah,
hey Matt,
exactly,
like I'll
exactly.
just like Matt, listen to it. I remember growing up, and I know that you were in that same era.
Yeah, and
The
sometimes
same.
I'll remember like concerts. You know what I mean? Like certain events at concerts. I actually try to purposely not record a ton. You know what I mean? Because now you have your phone and you can just record the whole
Yeah.
thing if you want. Now I try to just enjoy the experience and remember it, but maybe catch a little snippet of here and there. Just put it on like Twitter or something. But anyway, whatever. The point is, this book is interesting from a collection standpoint. I don't know that it's for everybody, but if you like it, it's probably a double. or if is something that's collections kind of interest you, or hoarding tendencies in your family might interest you. I don't know. But I definitely do. It's funny because now like I said, I have a decent, record player, and I do buy some vinyl, but I really more buy the vinyl, honestly, to support the bands I like
Yeah.
financially. Not, and I seriously think, what are Ian and Colin going to do with this? You know what I mean? They're going to like just they're going to donate this to DI probably.
I
You
don't
know what I mean?
know. I don't know. There's some stuff that I've kept from my dad when he passed away.
I would say there might be a few things, and Cami has done the same, and I've done the same a little bit with my dad. But
Maybe take,
they're typically pretty small knickknacks or things that
yeah,
remind
yeah,
me of, yeah. So I agree with you, but they're not going to keep 100 record collection of the
no,
stuff that they don't really care about.
no.
They might
Maybe
pick out the Joy Division album or something that they like, but you know what I mean?
maybe the obligatory 6-month hold, and then it goes in the trash.
Exactly. Anyway, all right, that's it. That's
Okay,
a life 35 boxes. Dave Haslam, great guy.
cool.
We'll have to tag him on Twitter and see what he thinks of my review. Hopefully he's not mad at me, but oh well. All right.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the Almanack of Naval. I can't even say this.
Ravikant.
Ravikant. There you go.
All right. First of all, an almanac is an annual calendar containing important dates and statistical information such as astronomical data and tide tables.
Right.
This book is not anything about a calendar. In fact, in the book, he recommends not having a calendar. So,
Well, we should say
just,
it's spelled differently than almanac, normal almanac, right?
yeah, this is Almanac
With a
with a
K at the end.
K.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure where that comes from. The noun is almanac, Almanack. I think of an almanac now as like the reminiscences or the
Mm-hmm.
teachings of somebody like Charlie Munger. There's an almanac for Charlie Munger that I still need to read. So Naval is how you pronounce it, actually. Not Naval, it's Naval. He grew up, he was a poor immigrant student, or poor immigrant from India. His parents moved to Eastern United States, very poor. He said his first job was illegally selling flowers out of a truck.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very unpopular as a kid, was not liked by many. So he said, so I would spend all of my time in the library. And he said, the library books were my best friends
Mm-hmm.
because they have 5,000 years of stories and philosophy. So he spent a lot of time in the library and was a very intelligent kid. He tested really well. I can't remember the name of the school, but he got into a private school. And he said that point changed the trajectory of the rest of his life, because it's like if you have Harvard on your resume, if you have Stanford or any Ivy League school, you
Or
get bumped
Weber
up.
State, maybe.
Weber State,
University of Utah,
Southern
whatever.
Utah University,
Southern Utah,
any of the
yeah.
public.
Then the big schools that really
Yeah, I
put
think he
out
mentions
the
that.
greats.
Yeah, he
Sorry.
mentions that in invisible ink in the book somewhere, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
read between the lines.
That's right.
We all get it.
We
Anyway,
understand.
go ahead.
So that kind of bumped him up. He had a bunch of startups. One of them became very successful, called Angel's List. He's, I think a Deca or centimillionaire. He's extremely wealthy now. He just does private equity, startups investing, seed investing. But the book really isn't about him. It's more about the things that he's learned. And he, in 2021, started just posting some of these personal, uh, I would call them teachings on Twitter. They're little short sentences about building a business, about how to be happy, how to stay healthy, just very good, well-rounded principles. And the book was excellent. I've seen it come up on a lot of different reading lists. So I thought I'm going to order it. And I actually do follow his account. I'd highly recommend following him. He's on Instagram, Twitter. But the principles are more to help people simplify the way they think about things and amplify their lives. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Mhm.
So one of the things he talks about in business, and this book talks about business, pursuing happiness, and philosophy. So I'll talk about a few of these things, maybe share some of the quotes from the book.
Okay.
So in business, he talks about how you have to have a specific knowledge that cannot easily be replicated by other people. That's desirable. If you figure something out, like take Google, for example, that changed the world. Microsoft changed the world. And if you have that specific knowledge, something that the world values, that adds value into the economic system, and you make money that way. Uh, Once you have that specific knowledge, you then need leverage. So Archimedes talked about, if you give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, I can move the world. He quotes that quotes a couple times in the book. So from a leverage perspective, he talks about humans, other human beings, being the oldest form of leverage. If you have a company, you have people that work in your company and they have inputs. So if you are, well, let me go through the different forms of leverage. So he talks about humans being leveraging other people's time to come work for your business. He talks about capital being a form of leverage. So having other people's assets working for you as a multiplier. And he talks about technology being a form of leverage. So marketing online and having things that are just out there always working for you, and investments. He talks about having an equity position in everything that you do, or trying to always have an equity position. So that's kind of the business side. He gives it as an example. If you are a let's say you're a cabinet maker, you make cabinets. You have to put the time in to make those cabinets, and you get compensated for your time. But since you're the only cabinet maker, you don't have any employees, you get out what you put in.
Mm-hmm.
So you put in economic utility into this thing, and you get money out of the other side. But now, as a cabinet maker, let's say that I hire a few employees, and those employees are now working. I teach them how to make cabinets, and now I can kind of remove myself out of the fire, and they're working building cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one form of leverage. The next form of leverage would be capital. I go out and I talk to some investors and say, hey, I really want to build this company. We're very good at it. We've got great markets that we're entering into. We've got good relationships with home builders. They give me their capital. I hire more employees, and we just kind of like scale from there. But now I want to go digital. I start marketing my company online, and it's just out there all the time. I can do SEO searches for my cabinet company and just build the business. So these different elements of leverage, he talks about just about how important they are. So that's on the business side. He gives some excellent things. Like I mentioned,
Does he talk about personal stuff as well, or is this more business?
no, he talks about personal stuff. He says in life, you're always compounding, whether it's your money or your relationships. In a business relationship, if he's working with someone, if he doesn't think he's going to be working with them long term for a very long time, he doesn't want to work with them. So he said that the closer you get to me, the better your values need to be, which I thought was a really excellent quote. But there's a lot of good quotes in here. I'll share one about luck. So he says that there are uh, four types of luck. The first kind of luck is blind luck, where one just gets lucky because something completely out of their control happened. This includes fortune, fate, etc. Then there's luck through persistence, hard work, hustle, and motion. This is when you're running around creating opportunities. You're generating a lot of energy. You're doing a lot to stir things up. It's almost like mixing a petri dish or mixing a bunch of reagents and seeing what combines. You're just generating enough force, hustle, and energy for luck to find you. A third way is you become very good at spotting luck. If you are very skilled in a field, You'll notice when a lucky break happens in your field, and other people who aren't attuned to it won't notice. So you become sensitive to luck. The last kind of luck is the weirdest, hardest kind, where you build a unique character, a unique brand, a unique mindset, which causes luck to find you. So he has on his site, here's one. I don't know if you can see that really well, but this is where he starts to talk about leverage. He's got the little teeter-totter place to stand and then the earth on one end of it. So a lot of good quotes. He quotes Richard Feynman a lot. He talks about he says, if you can't decide, the answer is no. Should I marry this person? Should I take this job? Should I buy this house? Should I move to this city? Should I go into business with this person? If you're not sure, then the answer is no. So unless you're really confident about the decision, don't do it. And he does talk about like where you live creates opportunities. So be mindful of where you're moving to, what neighborhood you're living in, what school systems your kids are going to be going to.
Yeah.
How that's extremely important. I've got this so marked up. He talks about reading at the end of the book. He gives a lot of books that he reads that he liked. So there's a really good reading list. And then I'll just kind of wrap up here because I don't think I'm doing this book justice. But he says this. He says, happiness is the state when nothing is missing. When nothing is missing, your mind shuts down and stops running into the past or future to regret something or to plan something. He talks about when you remove desire from life, you're happy. When you're in the present, you're not stressing about the future. You're not desiring something. I have to go get that thing. When you add more and more of those things, it creates anxiety. It creates stress. When you remove desire from your life, you're happy. You don't have anxiety. You don't have that stress. And so I have really kind of been wrestling with that idea of, it made me think, what do I desire? What are the things that I'm pursuing? Am I pursuing relationships? Am I pursuing things, monetary value? It's like you wake up in the morning and you get on the treadmill. So one thing I've taken from the book is I've been trying to meditate in the morning. I'll just take 20 minutes. I'll set my watch and I'll just sit still or lay still for 20 minutes and just let like the morning thoughts kind of run through my mind. Sometimes there's no thoughts coming through, but oftentimes the mind is very busy and I'll just let those thoughts roll through. And it's almost like a nice way to start your day because you've kind of let all that traffic through. And then my mind's a little bit more clear in the morning. So anyway, sounds kind of interesting, but it's good, great book. I'd give it a home run. It's one of those core books on the shelf that I think I'll refer back to often.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I actually realized if people will watch the video, they'll see a lot of the books that you own. So that's probably one thing that you semi collect, right?
Oh yeah.
The question is, what are those? At least those can be used by your posterity, right? I feel like
maybe. I hope so.
I feel like a library is one of the acceptable collections that people can have, right? Like if you collect something stupid, like I don't even know, shoes for me, like those aren't that's it's fine, but it's not like, oh, this is an acceptable hobby to collect books,
Well, he talks about, he said, you have to remember that in 100 years, 500 years, 5,000 years, 5 billion years, and this is a hard truth to accept because our ego wants to not believe this, but no one will remember me. No one will remember Zach Huish.
Right.
5 billion years from here. The earth won't even be here.
Right.
I don't know. The sun, maybe it'll be here. So he like really tries to get you out of your head thinking, just live a happy life.
Right.
Have principles and values. Enjoy it. Take as much from it as you can. And I thought, yeah, maybe I need to not take myself too seriously. like you said, our books actually go really well together because we collect as though
Yeah.
it's going to pass down through the generations. But when you think about it, how many people's stories persist beyond 100 years? It's
Right.
a very,
Not
very small percentage.
right. But luckily, we got this podcast, and it's going to live on in infamy forever.
If
So
I could find a way to take this podcast, put it on a satellite or
yeah,
just a rocket,
yeah,
send it out into space, like somebody will find it.
yeah, exactly. These aliens will be like, these guys are all right.
We should check this book out.
Exactly. That sounds like an interesting book.
So,
all right. Well,
there you
thanks
go.
everybody for listening to the Pitchbook Podcast. We really appreciate it. You have one thing. Go ahead.
One more thing. Okay. We're going to start linking these books in the show notes
Yes.
of the podcast. So if you push the link either for Matt's book, not that we're keeping score here, but Matt's book or Zach's book, it will take you to Amazon. You can buy these books. We're going to just try to make that a little bit easier so you don't have to go try to hunt them down on Amazon. You just click the link and it'll take you right to Amazon and you can check it out there. And there's no additional cost to do that, but we're just going to try and simplify that process for you.
Just so you know, I just looked this up on Amazon. A Life in 35 Boxes. Oh, I don't know if you can see this. Let's see.
I can't see it. Oh, there it is.
Can you see the price? Look at the price.
Okay.
$91.99 for this paperback.
What? Is it really?
Well, probably because it's a very small. I'm sure that's just somebody selling it and trying to make a big profit, obviously.
Okay.
But so don't buy that book for 99.
Try to find it.
If you want, just come. You can borrow mine. That's fine. Yeah, don't. I mean, he has a bunch of other books actually. Like I said, he's got some. If you're interested in the Manchester music scene, he's got a lot of cool books. Anyway,
so let us work for you. We'll attach links to the books, and hopefully they're not.
Yeah, if there's something that you like, and there's
Sure.
some reasonable costs there. So anyway, appreciate that. Thanks, Zach. Again, thanks to everybody for listening. Like, subscribe. If you're interested in a book, use the link. If not, no big deal. Share with your friends, and we'll catch you next time on the Pitchbook Podcast.